joining Anne's Art Desk. These videos are brought to you by the City of Palo Alto and the Palo Alto Art Center Foundation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Welcome to class. Thanks for coming. Here we are. I think this is the last class of Dive into Watercolor. And many people seem very keen on what Cindy Lane is doing with her wet and wet washes and her sea creatures. If you don't know who that is, you can look at the Google Classroom. I just posted some links there to her. And I previously posted stuff, so if you look deeper in the feed, you'll find more about her. I looked at our syllabus, and it kind of seemed like we did this week's project last week. So I thought I would show you a little bit about Cindy Lane and how she's doing it. And then we can do some more sort of atmospheric perspective landscape stuff. Does that sound like a good plan?
Good.
Yeah. All right. So do you guys want to try this Cindy Lane work?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some research into what Cindy uses to get those beautiful bleeds and wet patterns. And what's happening, trying not to record my chat, is that she's using this stuff, which is called watercolor ground. And most watercolor companies make something called watercolor ground. You need the one that's titanium white. I wouldn't use something else. If a pigment has the word titanium in it, that means opaque. So titanium yellow is opaque yellow. Zinc yellow is transparent yellow. Titanium white is opaque white. Zinc white is transparent white. They have different uses. So if you're going for a ground or something like that, titanium white. So I've painted a lot of papers and a lot of pieces of wood, like this one, with the watercolor ground. And I put a couple coats on. You're supposed to let it cure for 24 hours. I baked it in my oven for a couple hours because I didn't know that. So we'll see how this goes. But I did a couple tests already, and it's pretty lovely. The other thing that I was watching Cindy do is she often just dips a brush into white paint, or she uses a white marker.
And did you say that it's called white grout?
No, white like ground, as in like the ground you walk on.
A white ground. Okay.
So this is
so it's sort of like ground up.
Yeah. So what do you guys think of the picture of my desk today? Is it good?
Yeah. It's not in focus.
It's not in focus?
To me, it doesn't seem in focus. But it could be my glasses.
It could be that the lens of your camera is dirty.
Yeah.
Is it in focus, you guys? So this big piece of paper here underneath all the clutter has been painted with the ground. A couple coats, baked in the oven for a couple hours. Cindy uses a different brand of ground, but I'm assuming most of the brands are pretty much the same stuff. People who become experts at stuff would go and buy all the different grounds and test them against one another, and you can certainly do that.
So are you saying that you paint the paper first with that, the whole piece of paper?
Yeah, it's essentially a gesso for watercolor.
Oh.
So the reason it turns out she's getting these beautiful bleeds and washes because the paper she paints on does not absorb the water.
Oh.
Gives the paint time to run all over the place.
She was doing it on canvas, it looked like.
Yeah, and actually I did one on canvas. So I watercolor ground this canvas I had lying around. So we'll try that too.
So
and
Anne,
I watercolor grounded this piece of wood.
But it's sort of funny because it really didn't look like there was anything on the paper. It looked like she was just painting straight on, you know, like
yeah,
arches.
And this is also a piece of MDF board that I painted with the ground. So we have quite a lot of playing we can do here.
So we can't really do it with you because we don't have the ground, but
anything you can actually do this with you. You just have to use lots of water and any smooth watercolor paper.
Okay.
Will do it, and rice paper will do it.
Have you heard of that? What's it called? Beppo paper or what's
Oh,
it
Yupo
Yupo.
paper. That
Yeah,
will do.
you,
That stuff's
Yupo. Would that work?
Yeah, that would work. Because it has the same effect if the stuff is not sinking in. So something that Cindy, the reason Cindy uses this, it turns out, is she can then apply a couple different kinds of fixative and then frame a watercolor without glass, which sounds pretty good to me. Because one reason I don't create watercolor commercially is I don't want to get into the glass.
So Anne, did
Yeah.
you coat all of those things with that little bottle?
I had 2 of them and I emptied one.
Okay.
Oh.
What happens if you made it with water and you made it dissolve more?
I followed the directions on the bottle and it says you may dilute to 10%,
Uh-huh.
after which it doesn't work anymore.
Oh, interesting.
And if you want to just see the kind of consistency it comes at about that consistency.
Huh.
That's its base. It's kind of shaped a bit like acrylic paint.
You know what? The other thing is maybe I was thinking that maybe shiny calendar paper would work. Would it?
Some things are non-archival, and I bet that's non-archival.
Okay.
Just about anything would work, but anything the paint doesn't immediately sloop into, which would be cold press, which is sort of our standard paper, is gonna pretty much just drink the stuff. But the other thing you can do is just keep. We can do this method just fine on any paper. Like a Bristol board would work beautifully because it's so smooth. So this is a little piece of Bristol board.
I kind of tried it on Bristol board. It certainly didn't work like hers.
Okay. Well, let's just try it. And we won't do it the whole session for those of you who are frustrated that it's not a paint-along. You guys ready? You want to do this?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the method, which is really to put an actual puddle down, a clean, clear puddle. Now, for my sketching, just so you could see them, I used a watercolor pencil. And Cindy uses a water-soluble graphite pencil, which you would think that I didn't know that exists, but it does. And when you go to the store and ask for one, they'll have them. I actually really love them. I discovered them when some of my students brought them to figure drawing class.
I have one.
Yeah, and you can also buy them as sort of big blocks, which is really fun to work with. So then you can kind of do the Cindy Lane thing and let the paint move all about inside the puddle you have added. She moves her paper around too. And she often will just sort of coax the paint. But, and she doesn't do that somehow. I don't know. Oh, one thing that's neat is she doesn't show this on her videos, but the gesso makes it so that you can erase. Because the paint is literally not absorbed into the paper. That's pretty cool. And this would only get more beautiful when you add more colors. So that's kind of neat. Then I did this like nice, this is like a Matisse shape. I like Matisse's cutouts, as many of you know. So I did a Matisse shape. I wanted to layer this idea with the mascoid, but I can't find my mascoid, so no mascoid. I'm a little behind on organization and such things. So here it is. This is actually going to be really beautiful. What if I made this one, this blue, Oh, that looks very Cindy Lane. This one, this green. I'm just walking along my greens. And then just be patient. It will get there. I also think she does a lot of, in her videos, it looks more dynamic than it is because she does a lot of careful editing and cutting of her videos. So that the actual process is a little more slow than it appears to be. You can also take a brush and sort of essentially marble the paint into the form that you wish it to have.
And she sometimes drops white stuff into the paint. Is that white paint that she's using?
You know, she's using a Posca pen and she's also using just like a white gel pen, I think. My white gel pen is empty, so I thought I would demonstrate that with my Pro White, which has a very similar effect. So you can, if it's dry, you can paint on top of it like this, and if it's wet, you get this sort of
like a starburst thing.
Yeah, a little starburst thing. And what's amazing about Cindy is she knows exactly how wet or dry it has to be to get the effect she wants, right? So where it's really puddly, you get a very different effect from where it's almost dry. It was fun to go. So many of you seemed so curious about this. I was like, okay, let's hit it, because obviously she's doing something different, and indeed she is doing something different. But I like these little capillary bleeds that the white does.
I like the aspect, Anne, of how did they do that?
Yeah, and actually, you know, I think people have this misunderstanding of artists that it's, you know, very freewheeling, free-spirited, you just discover. But in fact, most artists are incredible materials geeks, and they're essentially material scientists. And when you see somebody like Andre Penovac or Cindy Lane, they've really taken that to a whole new level. And I think that is really lovely. Little sea creature here. You guys want to see a couple more?
Yeah.
So I just drew some shapes here that we could, so I didn't have to think of them while I was talking and painting and teaching. I find that there's only so much cognitive room for different tasks.
Oh, Anne, do you know about that paint she was talking about, that, what does she call it? Granulated or something like that?
Sodalite?
Yeah, I don't know what, I've never used what she's talking about. And the tutorial I sent you is also an advertisement for a kind of paint. And I don't really know if that kind of paint is really different from other kinds of paint or not.
It looked like it's separated into different colors.
Yeah, in which case, Teresa, it would be right up your alley.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it would be fun.
So this is kind of fun. You're kind of mixing the sumie and the wash together and using the shape of the brush to start the wash, which is kind of cool. Oh, cool. It just fell in and it looks so gorgeous. Okay, Cindy Lane in the house here. Something I'm really enjoying about it is that if I drop some of all this wet paint somewhere, this never happens on her videos, you notice. I can just mop it up and it hasn't absorbed into the ground. The ground is a little protective. So look, all these drops can just be removed without harm. Ordinarily, I'd have to sit down with a Q-tip and be like, okay, being chill, being patient with this. But I think I may have just talked too much and caused myself trouble. Because I think that that's not going to come back. Oh, maybe it is. Or I could just be a better, carefuler painter when I'm not teaching, because I find teaching to be kind of anti-precision. Something that I just love is sort of putting lines into wet washes and then letting the lines sort of misbehave. Because then it starts looking like paper marbling, which is pretty fun. I think another thing she may do is take almost pure paint and drop it into her wash and then just let it go. So the wash is drying as I paint. So this is where she's really the master of the material, because she knows what's happening. She knows how dry or wet it is as she goes. Pretty cool. I wonder also if she sometimes does something like this, where if something is too puddly, like here, she'll just lift some of the puddliness away.
That's cool.
And then you can come back in and make it more precise again. Something that you lose when you sort of do this kind of spontaneous stuff is a sense of careful line. So you can go back in and give that in some other way. Which is kind of neat. Okay, now I'm just having fun. Any questions? It sounds like everybody is very happily painting.
Yep.
Excellent. So funny, when I was teaching this third grade art class, we would, the homeroom teacher and I would ask the same question, any questions? And if we got no response, we'd say, wow, we're doing a good job. Because we would look in the Zoom call and everybody would be working very hard. Okay, I maybe, this is to where your cat comes in and says you wrecked it. So I'm going to stop on that one. I thought this would be fun because when you're done, you can strip off. It's been masking taped around. Yeah, I put masking tape around this little wood thing and ground on the top. And then I've also sanded the wood thing because it was just put in a jig and it was really rough. So I thought it would be really fun to just make it neat. And I think to do that, I kind of need to mix up essentially, for once, I'm not going to use my color pure, but mix some blues together. And then actually, I think I want to make a wash. So when you're thinking about getting good at doing watercolor, you might want to think about always working the wet edge. especially for like this is a pretty complex little shape I'm trying to sort of do very fast on camera. I just want to keep working the wet edge. So I want to keep my wet edge as small as possible and move fast through it. And sometimes that requires a much bigger brush. Because when you go into a dry edge, you're going to have some trouble. Because that's where your brush marks start to show. So I thought that this would look pretty neat with like some other blues dropped in.
And does it take longer to dry because of the gesso?
Yes, it does, because it's not soaking in. So you have to be more patient with it. Something that I've discovered by teaching this class is that I used to own better brushes. And I thought that it didn't matter for watercolor the way it doesn't matter for acrylic or oil, but it does matter. So something I'm about to do is press the magic button and buy myself some better brushes. Because I'm getting a little tired of the struggle. What I want is sort of a pinkish glow on this side. There we go. Then do the Cindy Lane thing. So notice that when you copy somebody's technique, you don't have to copy their subject matter. It would probably help you if you love what she does to paint a humpback whale, but it's not really your goal in life to paint what Cindy Lane paints or paint like Cindy Lane. It's just the goal here is to learn what Cindy Lane does. So, I mean, essentially what we're doing is kind of the homework I've been giving the acrylics people, which is find an abstract painter and do your thing in their style. Did you all see the comment?
No.
Haven't seen it yet.
No, I haven't seen it yet either. I tried one night to go out to Shoreline. That didn't work.
Yeah. You might
We
have
had fog last night.
what?
I said we had fog last night.
I think it's around for a while still.
Yeah. The top of my daughter's little head almost blew off with excitement. It was really
Where did you see it, Ann?
just like on Encinal Field. Like we just walked out to Encinal Field and looked at it in Menlo Park. I just went there with my mom. And then we just walked out into the street with some good binoculars and saw it again.
Oh.
So it wasn't that hard to see if you had, I think it's the binoculars might be the rate limiting step,
Yeah,
not the location.
right. Because my friend could see it because she had binoculars, but I didn't have binoculars, so I couldn't see it.
Yeah, I think without a good set of binocs, you might not have any luck. Because Katie and I, on our night walk to see it last night, we met a lot of people who were trying to see it but couldn't.
Mm.
Because of COVID-19, we couldn't loan them our binoculars, which was kind of sad. Okay. You guys happy painting? Shall we move on to another lesson? What's the plan here?
I'm so surprised that this is the last class. I thought we had one more. I was like, oh no.
Is this it? I think this is it. Is it the 23rd?
Yeah, it's
I think that's maybe it. I wish we had another one. I think in the future I may schedule them to run in batches of 6.
that's good.
Yay.
Yeah.
Good.
Are you teaching anything in August?
You know, I just learned that I'm going to be running a homeschool in my own home because the school isn't going to teach.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm sorry to tell you guys. I hope you're not too disappointed. I think I'm going to take the next 5 weeks
Good for you.
and plan that.
Mm.
And then I'll be back to usual programming once things have settled in.
Yeah.
Because I
And
think
we
I'm
should-
going to be running a one-room schoolhouse here.
Oh, wow.
Is there any way, I was thinking, there's so many of us seniors who really could help Zoom in one-on-one with some of these kids for half an hour, give moms a break or just help them with something, because I can't imagine how hard that is for you to work and do everything. But I'm happy to try to meet your kids and help, with math or
Yeah.
reading,
There's
listening to
a
them.
wonderful group that's been doing Zoom math tutoring all summer.
Yeah.
I keep in touch with them. They're called, what are they called? They helped my son out a lot. And I love what they do. And they set up Zoom tutoring for kids. Yeah. They're very good. And Sebastian had this retired math teacher who taught in Sunnyvale schools for his whole career. And he's like, I still want to do a little bit.
Right.
Really nice of him.
Especially
What?
one-on-one is so much easier than a whole classroom of kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be weird. That's interesting. This is kind of cool. I gotta say.
Yeah,
The whole watercolor ground thing, I had my doubts, but I'm coming to it.
So this Bristol board is this sort of foamy board that's white and shiny. Is that Bristol board?
The foamy stuff is insulation board and will drive you nuts. Don't do that. You need a piece of cardstock or something like that.
No, I mean, this is working. It sort of looks like the backing of some picture, like how they have that.
Well, anything that
it has a smooth finish.
Yeah. But crystal board probably works pretty well, and hot press probably works well. So now that my background is dry, now I can put my stars in. Wow, any little bleed and it's a mess. So notice I put in stars before and they all disappeared. I think that has to dry before anything else happens to it. Kind of cute though. I had one more idea for you. So can you guys see that? How about bigger? Do it bigger. So this is kind of a neat piece of paper because on this piece of paper you can see the unprimed and the primed. So primed is on my left. Oh, so here. So primed is A and unprimed is just the plain old paper, which I think is Bristol paper. So primed and unprimed. And you can see the difference. In part because the water I was using to dilute was a little muddy. So this is actually kind of nice because what we could do is go like this. Do a circle on each one and see what happens. We sort of do the same treatment.
Is that cold press paper? The unprimed?
Yeah, it's like smooth unprimed. This is smooth unprimed cold press paper. And this is smooth primed cold press paper. And you can see that they do behave quite differently.
The color looks different.
Well, this background color, I think that the ground has a little bit of a creamy color. And I also think the paint I used to do it had a little bit, or the water I used had a little bit of color to it. This one looks like a person. And then you can also just sort of, I think Cindy Lane does this a lot where she lets the washes find their own way.
And have you tried it with pencils, the watercolor pencils?
Mm.
You know, I was doing my sketching in watercolor pencils so that it would disappear. This is interesting. It pushes this paint away. That's interesting.
Huh. Huh.
Maybe this is
Interesting.
not so much on the primed one. It mixes in better over there. Wow, this is almost a little abstract at this point.
Huh. I just put watercolor pencil on mine and it was kind of interesting.
Fascinating. Now I'm just playing on camera. What else can we talk about? I want to do that during class. So I was thinking we would do a little bit of a little bit more about landscape because I see a lot of you are interested in that as well. And this is a primed piece of Mason MDF board. And I thought what I would do is just take this acrylic landscape and move it over there and put it into watercolor. Does that seem like a good idea?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so I'm using a watercolor pencil to sketch because the watercolor pencil will literally disappear into the picture. So any lines I make are just gonna become part of the next set of paint. It's not a very exciting picture. It's from one of the calendars in Studio A. It's a picture of Tuscany or something. There are various compositional reasons that these things should be here and not there and that kind of stuff. It's been fun to teach the acrylic class because it makes me sort of vocalize a lot about or think about or or just sort out in my head a lot about how you simplify paintings in general down into something you can paint.
Mhm.
It's kind of interesting. So if we do the Cindy Lane thing here as well, which is really kind of fun, I'm loving it. We could just paint in the sky. And again, with the whole, like the win game, the win strategy for watercolor is to run the washes together when you want them to bleed into each other and wait for them to dry when you don't want them to. So the way I naturally paint is to sort of paint the top of the painting and the bottom of the painting, and then the middle, and then the kind of middle strips, so that my edges don't butt up against each other if I don't want them to.
Mhm.
And that really helps. Just, you know, you're supposed to paint light to dark with watercolor. And I think you could probably do that if you were more patient than I am. But if I'm out field sketching, I tend to just skip around to the next driest thing. You probably want to be careful to preserve your lights because they're quite hard to get back. Although they might be easier with the watercolor ground. Oh, that's pretty. Because it seems like you can just wash the paint back off the watercolor ground. That's like a whole new world of watercoloring to me. So let's see if all that could just run that way. Get kind of a neat light sky effect that way. All right, so then the next thing I would paint would be something that isn't next to the sky. Because I kind of want the sky to essentially age. And that could be pretty much anything except the roofs and tops of the buildings. So if we paint light to dark, let's paint the next lightest thing, which would be sort of these distant fields. Because you want to sort of keep things in atmospheric perspective. This little box of a house needs to remain. And I think my original, there was sort of a lot of purple back there. Okay, I think I just changed the way I watercolor forever. Something I love about doing art is this can totally happen any day. And there are two little buildings here that are sort of compositionally important to get you all the way back to the back of the painting. And it's still pretty far away, so you probably want to dilute some of that green so it doesn't look too strong for being in the distance. And if you want things to go into the distance, they have to be bluer, grayer, softer, more neutral. All those things. So then we should be getting to darker and brighter and more intense colors. And I always feel like watching somebody's palette is, when I learn from painters, I watch their palettes. I watch what their palettes are doing, because I feel like I learn a lot from just seeing where they go from their palette. And this is where we can think about Cindy and like think about sort of wet edge live mixing of the color. It's something I would never ever do in acrylic. It's kind of fun to do it here. Notice also that I don't do it with opposite colors. I do it with analogous colors. So this strip that changes the orange to the green is a yellow orangey color, but it doesn't have a lot of straight red dunked into it. It would go completely brown. Anybody have questions or thoughts or want to share anything about this?
What kind, let's see, do I have, hold on. What kind of paints are you using?
I'm using my nice schminky paints.
Oh, okay.
They're sort of super powered.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of, like Taylor Rowney makes good paints. Gamblin makes good paints. I mean, there are so many good paint makers, it's hard to choose.
Did you see my questions on in the classroom that I put late last night?
Oh, I think I last looked at it earlier last night, but I'll look at it again.
Oh, okay. Because I was saying, I mean, I have a hard time. I mean, I can get to the second layer, but it's like the third layer that gives the personality of the picture that I'm not quite sure how to give it that pop. But I think one thing you just said was, lighter in the distance and the foreground should be stronger, right?
And also, like, before you finish a painting, you should think about, do I have really, really light lights and really, really dark darks?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, to me, a painting is something you evaluate a lot. Like, so a lot, as you go through the painting, you think, what is it missing now? What is its biggest problem now? Like, what can I fix now? And you sort of work your way along thinking, what is my next biggest problem? Like, one of my problems is that I have to wait for everything out here to dry before I can paint that. And I have to wait for everything out here to dry before I can paint that. So right now I'm really in stage 1. And then in this foreground, I'm kind of doing a wet and wet stage 2, where I'm putting all this in very fast.
And then there was the other site you sent us, I was saying that the guy did a fence or the rocks like you have done in the foreground there without all the paint. He just had a few lines, but he ended up way up in your sky was the whole picture, and then the rest was a few lines. I don't know if anybody else saw that picture.
I'll have to take a look.
Well, it's sort of buried in there.
Are interacting with one another and posting stuff. That was kind of my hope for using that platform. I'm sorry I haven't been more interactive there this week. I've been really reeling with this idea of home-baked school.
Oh, sure. That's a lot to take on.
It really is. Yeah.
So a bunch of us are talking about forming cooperatives.
It's like the 70s, 60s, and 70s.
It's
all coming back again.
It all comes around. I've roller skated my whole life, and I've waited to be trendy my whole life, and it turns out this summer I am trendy.
You go, girl.
I'll be posting skating videos to Instagram any minute. No, I won't. Never mind. So anyway, so I would say my foreground is in stage 2. And then stage 3 would be when it's dry, I go back in and put a few details just to punch it a little more.
Wow.
I totally feel like the last hour has changed the way I watercolor forever.
How so? Like,
it feels freer and looser and easier to fix. It feels more like painting. Like I always feel like watercoloring, if you really want control over it, you gotta think ahead. And you have to think in you have to paint in a kind of an unnatural way, or unnatural to me way, where I have to really plan, and I'm not a planner. I prefer to fix things as I go. I have a plan inside my head. I'm not that outrageous, but I do like to see things as they happen. So this sort of like, wow, you could just wipe it off. I really like that. Like say this is really muddy. I don't like it. Look at this. Comes right off. And you can really take it off, like all the way off. Apparently the surface is a little bit fragile. So you really don't want to scrub, but you could damper it off essentially. Or essentially like print it off. So for compositional reasons, there ought to be something here. So I'm making something up.
It'll be interesting to see when it dries, and then maybe after a year or two how it looks.
Yeah, so I'll probably get inspired enough by this to finish it and then fix it in the manner that Cindy recommends. And then see if it really is, you could frame it without damaging it and not put glass on it.
Wait, what does she recommend to do?
So she recommends 2 layers of 2 different kinds of fixatives. So look, now I can move into stage 3 because it's even just a little bit better, right? And so I don't even have to make marks that make sense. I just have to make marks that say this is in front.
So Anne, on your watercolor work before, were you ever using fixatives?
No, because I would always just gloss it. I've used a lot of fixative for pastels, but I've never tried to fix kind of stuff. Let's see. What if we did this? How unhappy would we be? So do you guys have other questions? Do you want to share stuff on Google Classroom? Or do you want to keep painting? What's your plan?
Oh, so the other question or comment that I had was, I had bought these, my friend had an extra set of Russian paints. And so I bought them, but they don't really, I don't think they really are work as well as some of the other paints.
Yeah.
I don't know if you found that out, or have you used?
What's the name of them? Are they Yarkas?
It's not Yarka. It's, hold on. It's White Knights or something.
Yeah. It kind of depends on how much pigment they have in them, and I don't know much about that
brand.
It
But
might-
it did say it had gum Arabic in it, so that, didn't you say that's not really?
Most paints have some Arabic in them. That is not a count against a kind of paint. What matters is how much it has in it.
Your screen went black again.
Yeah.
Or was that our screen?
No, it's coming back. So I got a new camera that focuses much better and is just easier to work with.
Yeah.
And we discovered 20 minutes before class that this turn off function is part of the camera.
Oh.
We have time to troubleshoot it and fix it. So I keep
That's good. You know if we're paying attention or not.
Yeah. Well, I should be paying attention, and I'm sorry I don't catch it.
No.
So I kind of like, see how it bled a little bit, like the building bled. I kind of like that because it makes it look part of the landscape. But I can also sort of, because of the ground, I can push stuff around a little bit here and make things look more separate from one another. So it doesn't get too mushy.
I don't know.
So Anne, since you're taking time off, will the Google Classroom remain open to us, or?
Yeah, it can remain open to you, and you guys could actually set up a little study group using it.
Oh, that's sort of cool. You
That would
still can post comments to it and
What?
see.
So you can keep adding materials and comments to it.
Oh, okay.
At will, if you wish, which would be kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm also going to take my kids away for a camping trip.
Nice.
It's sort of a like, this is not going to be pretty, guys. So let's just go outside for a little while.
Wow.
Because it really isn't. It's going to be a long haul.
Well, you know what? Since we have this this 1 o'clock time too, I don't mind like doing a Zoom once in a while. We could get together if you guys want to.
That sounds good.
You probably need a real Zoom account. I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, actually the 40 minutes is probably long enough.
Yeah, it probably is.
But you know what you can do if people want to stay on, everybody just sort of comes on and off again. They just,
You know, something that would happen a lot with my collage class at the art center is people would stay, and some people would stay until 6 p.m. and they just work. Which is kind of sweet.
Is that Karen said that about the collage?
Yeah, like my Monday collage class when it was still meeting in the art center.
Uh,
I had a few students who just loved being there, and they would just hang out.
oh, I get it.
And
Oh,
the
do you
evening
teach
class
the
would say,
collage
"Oh,
class?
you guys have to go home." We need to go.
Did you teach the collage class?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Oh,
yeah,
I
that was
always want to take that. I just haven't.
yeah. It was really nice.
It was a great class. I loved
Yeah,
it.
it was fun.
I designed it to sort of be art summer camp for grown-ups.
Yeah, I always think that's, should be camp for grown-ups.
Are you using white on that, Ann?
Using something called Naples yellow,
Oh, Naples yellow.
ochre mixed with a little bit of white.
Ah, okay.
So your schminky paints or whatever is that the set that comes, or did you pick all the colors you wanted?
No, I ordered a set, and I must say that if I created a set, I wouldn't include any of these. And I actually may pry them out and put some day glow paints in because I really want to play with the day glow paints. There's a paint maker in San Francisco called A Case for Making, and they make day glow paints, and I may put some in just to be silly. Because we all need a little bit of silly. I mean, honestly.
It's nice those koi paints have some pretty colors in it.
Yeah. Now my paint is probably dry enough to put in these buildings back here. Although that edge right there is going to be too wet to touch.
Are you using the colors straight out of the box, or are you mixing?
Yeah. I do find that one of the reasons paintings often turn out to be too dull is everybody takes the beautiful straight color and mixes them down. And then it's like, oh, why are my paints so muddy? Well, you mixed them down. You know, if you mix them down, that's actually what happens.
So you're saying that you use the paints pretty strong?
Yeah, well, I use them strong, but I also use them, like, I don't often mix them with more than one or another color. And I also punch them up a little bit by mixing them with analogous colors. And then I use my dark primaries as blacks and browns. Wow, look at that.
Yeah. Make it look so easy.
No, it's the main thing, I think, is to be enjoying what's happening, not thinking I can't do this, because that's not fun, and you won't paint very much if you think like that.
Right.
Especially when I can't do this, you're not having fun anymore, and you will stop doing it. So it's quite nice to have more of the attitude of like, I wonder what it does when I do this, or I wonder what it does when I do that. I'm really thinking of writing this book called Meta Drawing, which is about sort of the skills you need to draw well. And I think that is one of the skills you need to make good art, is this idea that, oh, wow, look, that when you're drawing, you need to be thinking, what happens next? Not, I can't do this. Or I can't do this yet, or I can't do this as well as she can. It really has to be much more like, it's much more of like a science-based idea of, I wonder what happens when. So I wanted to show you guys something on Google Classroom before we close.
You know what I was thinking? I wonder, I mean, like the Zoom, I don't know if they closed down this particular Zoom link, but maybe we could just use the same Zoom link to have a,
Let me ask Fanny, because I know that the Palo Alto Zoom account is getting busy.
Yeah.
I can ask her, but she'll probably say, wow, we're starting to like schedule a lot of stuff on that account.
Oh, okay.
But if that is possible, and I just tell them, they'd really like to just have the meeting each week, and I'm going to be away, and it would be a favor to me if you would keep it open. It's possible. I think she would. The more I think about it, the more I think she might like that. So let me ask her. She's in the
Okay.
office tomorrow. Oh, something you guys should know is that the Palette Art Center has changed their schedule up thanks to the fact that city incomes have dropped by like 85%.
Yeah.
And they're closed on Mondays completely now. There's not even a skeleton crew.
Mm.
So it used to be you could call them on Mondays and you'd get lots of people, but they just closed on Mondays.
Mm.
But they'll be open every, completely on Saturdays. So they used to do sort of halvesies Mondays and Fridays, but now they're just wholesies Tuesdays through Friday,
Mm.
which I thought was kind of a nice solution. Okay, it's in there. So I wanted to show you guys some stuff that happened on, so here's the picture just for like,
So nice.
Mm.
got the wire in front of it just for reference. But see how rich and bright it looks, even though it's a watercolor? I think that is a good idea. Okay, I'm gonna switch modes here to here.
Could you just put the original one back underneath your paint thing so I can look at it one more time? Yours is so much better.
Which one do you like better?
Yeah, that. No, that's fine. I mean,
The acrylic
I
or
just-
the watercolor?
I like your watercolor much better.
I think, just to like critique my own painting, you can critique it as well if you like. I do this all the time. The city is too dark and too cold. It needs to be lighter and warmer because it's jumping forward. Back here, there's too much chroma, too much intensity. It needs to lie back a little bit. So this stuff needs to get essentially smeared off, which because of the ground, it turns out you can do that. So see how when I just take it off, it all lies down a little bit better.
Mm.
And then this stuff needs to be punched up. So its third layer is not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the third layer is when you do stuff like, that just came out too dark. Oh, much better. I like it.
And can you put a wash over once it's all dried?
I think the wash would reactivate all the paint. Because it really jumps back in. Like, this is kind of neat. You make the sky wet and you take a bit of paper towel and you essentially just, I don't know, maybe not, but you can just wash off the watercolor paint.
Mm.
But like when you
And did you also just take your tube of white and then just put it on that building?
Yeah. Yeah, you sure could. But one thing I like about this is that I can have my whites without using my whiteout, which I consider the whiteout to be a little forced looking.
If you use whiteout, is it permanent?
No, I would use actual artist white. I kind of joke about the whiteout. I would use artist white.
I just ordered all those white things that you put up.
Good for you. But see, look what my Pro White does for the foreground flowers.
Oh, nice, yeah.
So it sort of just adds another layer.
Mm-hmm. But when you do your third layer, if it's all dry, I mean, it's dry, right? When you do the third layer, then do you go in and wet areas so that you can have a
If I want to
soft.
radically change an area with this ground, I can, which previously with just watercolor paper, I couldn't.
Uh-huh.
But I really like this I like it a lot. Thank you, Cindy Lane. Never done it before. So thank you guys for being curious, because I was always just mesmerized by what she did, but never really thinking about how did she do it. I was just like, not my thing, not what I do, but I really like it. Okay.
Did someone
It's
tell you
great,
about Cindy Lane, or did you just find Cindy Lane?
I just searched her up on Google and I found, I tried to look for some explanation of what she actually used. And I found a Google search result that said Cindy Lane's techniques and materials, and that's what I linked to.
Hmm.
So she has lots and lots of movies of her painting these beautiful whales, but she's not telling you exactly what she uses. And that's the information you need in order to do it.
Thank you for joining Anne's Art Desk. These videos are brought to you by the City of Palo Alto and the Palo Alto Art Center Foundation.